A historic blockade is starving a regime of its oil wealth, and now an entire country is acting like a pressure cooker about to explode.
It really is. I mean, this situation is moving incredibly fast.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a scenario where a massive national economy is just, well, it's an absolute freefall. Since April 13th, 2026, a U.S. maritime blockade has basically choked off Iran's southern ports.
Right. Completely choked off.
And the fallout is just wild. Inflation has skyrocketed to an 80-year high. Desperate students are, flooding the streets to protest. And the regime, they are lashing out by firing ballistic missiles at their neighbors.
Yeah, they're reacting like a state in total panic.
Exactly. So our mission today for you listening is to take this huge stack of recent intelligence reports, some on-the-ground sources, and hard economic data, and just connect the dots. We want to understand how a blockade out in the ocean triggered a massive Gen Z uprising at home.
Because you really can't separate the two. I mean, they're fighting an economic war on the water, a digital war online, and a military war in the region.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the riots, you have to understand the money. And honestly, it reminds me of a captain on a sinking ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ship is rapidly taking on water, and instead of fixing the hole, the captain is just screaming at the passengers for getting wet.
That is a perfect way to put it, actually.
So let's look at the numbers. Before this conflict, roughly 30 massive oil tankers moved through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. That was their lifeblood.
Right. 30 a day.
And today, that number has crashed to just 1 or 2 tankers a day.
Which is just a devastating drop. The blockade has completely severed them from their direct maritime routes.
So how are they getting anything in or out?
Yeah.
Because they have to survive somehow.
Well, they're forced into these incredibly expensive workarounds. They're smuggling goods indirectly through the Omani port of Kasab and Iraq's Qasr port.
But they can't just sail an Iranian-flagged ship right in there, right?
Exactly, no. They have to use non-Iranian flags.
Yeah.
It's basically multi-leg smuggling.
Yeah.
They move cargo to Iraq, put it on trucks, and physically drive it across the border.
Which means middlemen, massive fuel costs, bribes.
All of it. And the government isn't eating those extra costs. They pass that massive markup directly to the consumer.
And that leads to the domestic fallout, which is just catastrophic for a normal family. By May 2026, annual inflation hit 57.7%.
Which is the highest since 1943.
Right, back in World War II. And the point-to-point inflation, comparing prices to this exact month last year, reached a staggering 83.9%.
It's just hard to even wrap your head around those numbers.
I mean, take the price of milk. Milk surged by 137%. Imagine going to the store for your kids, and milk costs more than double what it did a few months ago.
It creates absolute daily panic. And the government's response isn't to fix the supply chain.
No, they're literally threatening merchants with the death penalty for, quote, price gouging. But if the regime executes shopkeepers for inflation, doesn't that just destroy the supply chain even faster?
Of course it does. What's fascinating here is how this reveals their complete loss of geopolitical leverage.
How do you mean?
Well, historically, Iran's trump card was always the Strait of Hormuz. They'd say, mess with us and we'll shut down the strait. But because of this blockade, the world is adapting.
They're finding other ways around.
Exactly. Gulf states like Abu Dhabi are permanently bypassing the strait. They're using Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman instead. So Iran is losing its historic ability to use that strait as a strategic threat against the world.
Wow. So they're losing their biggest bargaining chip.
Yeah, they're completely boxed in.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When an economy collapses like this, the youth naturally look for an escape. But what happens when the government locks the exit doors?
You get the Konkur crisis.
Right. We are seeing nationwide student protests erupting across 20 different provinces all over this university entrance exam called the Konkur.
Driven almost entirely by Gen Z.
Yeah. And the spark for this is a controversial new rule. A student's 3-year high school GPA now holds a definitive 60% impact on their university admission.
Which I know, to an American listener,
Right.
using a high school GPA sounds totally normal.
Right, why riot over that?
Because of the deep educational inequality there. Over 80% of the top-ranked students come from these highly affluent elite schools in northern Tehran.
Because working-class kids in the deprived provinces, They can't afford the private tutors.
Right.
And there's this literal grade mafia where wealthy families basically buy high GPAs. So making the GPA account for 60% is mathematically locking out the poor.
It's effectively stealing their futures.
And the absurdity of the testing conditions.
Hmm.
The government is forcing these kids to take high-stakes in-person exams while they're dealing with, rolling power outages.
An 88-day internet blackout.
Yeah, and actual air raid warnings going off outside. So let me ask you, are these teenagers really just risking their lives over a standardized test, or is this exam just the spark for something much bigger?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Konkur was historically the last legitimate escape staircase for lower-income Iranians.
An escape staircase.
Right. It was their one path to social mobility or maybe getting a degree to emigrate. So these protests are actually a complete rejection of regime incompetence.
They're looking at that 83.9% inflation and realizing there are no jobs anyway.
Exactly. Even if they play by the rules, they can't afford a basic life.
So, how does a regime respond when its youth openly rebels during an economic collapse?
By plunging the country into the dark.
Literally, they hit them with an 88-day internet blackout. And it wasn't just unplugging a router. They're importing Chinese technology to try and build a permanent filter net.
Yeah, they want to totally isolate their citizens from the outside world.
And while the digital lights were out, the physical crackdown was just brutal. We're talking over 6,000 arbitrary arrests.
People just pulled off the streets.
Yes, and the cover-ups are incredibly sinister. The regime is secretly burying slain protesters at night, like the case of a 19-year-old student, Rauf Derakhshani Mer.
Just buried in the dark without a real funeral.
Exactly. And they're going into the database at the Beheshti-Yazar cemetery and just deleting the victims' names from the system entirely.
It's an attempt to literally erase the human cost from history.
It is terrifying. And they're doing this to foreigners, too. Look at the British couple, Lindsay and Craig Foreman.
That case is absolutely heartbreaking.
They're serving 10 years in Evin prison on espionage charges, which they deny. They are on a severe hunger strike right now. Lindsay's blood pressure dropped to 80 over 50.
Which is life-threatening.
It is. And the prison is denying them medical care. They won't even give her glasses or allow phone calls.
And why are they doing this? It's direct retaliation. Because they somehow managed to speak to the BBC about executions happening inside the prison.
It's just brutal. But let me push back on their whole filternet plan for a second. So what does this all mean? Can a country actually run a modern economy while completely cutting off the global internet?
This raises an important question. There's a big difference between just shutting off the internet and creating a working Chinese-style ecosystem.
Right, because China has their own versions of everything.
Exactly. China has massive domestic tech alternatives.
Yeah.
But Iran currently lacks the domestic tech infrastructure to pull this off.
So if they cut off the outside web, their own banks stop working.
Precisely. They end up crashing their own commerce. They can't fully isolate without destroying what's left of their economy.
So they are totally cornered, failing economy, furious Gen Z, failing tech. So they try to project strength by lashing out at their neighbors.
Yes. The recent military escalation is a perfect example. After U.S. forces hit Iranian radar sites on Qosim Island, Iran fired 7 ballistic missiles at Kuwait and Bahrain.
7 missiles. But let's look at the stats on that. CNTCOM and its partners successfully intercepted 6 of those 7 missiles.
Swatted them right out of the sky.
And the 7th one missed its target entirely. So is this meant to be a show of strength, or does it just expose a severely weakened military?
You have to look at the psychology here. These foreign attacks are basically a smokescreen for their domestic weakness.
They're trying to look tough for the folks at home.
Right. But they are overplaying their hand. They're losing leverage in the strait, and the diplomatic fallout is huge. Gulf nations and Jordan are furious about the airspace violations.
And the U.S. administration is holding firm, right? They're refusing to unfreeze $24 billion in assets unless Iran actually changes its behavior. Empty promises aren't cutting it anymore.
And they're even alienating former allies. We're seeing pushback from leaders in Lebanon now.
Yeah.
Iran is isolating itself on every single front.
Man. Okay, let's wrap this up and pull the threads together. A historic maritime blockade has shattered this country's economy, triggering 80-year record hyperinflation.
And that economic collapse ignited the Gen Z protests.
Right, the youth have no future, so they rebel. And the regime responds with internet blackouts, mass arrests, and ineffective missile strikes to try and cling to power. Everything is connected.
It's a textbook pressure cooker.
It really is. So, to leave you with a fascinating cultural dilemma we found in the sources. It's about the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup.
Oh, the flag issue.
Yes, there's a battle over the Iranian flag. Many Iranian fans want to fly the historic lion and sun flag in the stadiums as a symbol of defiance against the regime.
But FIFA rules ban what they consider political symbols.
Exactly. So FIFA is banning the historic flag, which leads us to a really profound thought to ponder as we close out. If a government's own people reject its official flag on the world stage, who really gets to define a nation's identity?
That is the million-dollar question right now.
It sure is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.